is to look at what's happened in that journey, if you like. So firstly, I just want to start by saying a little bit about the cinnamon itself, because cinnamon has been a very important plant, or the product of cinnamon has always been part of civilization. And so this is just an image that I was able to extract, and this is from a pharmacopoeia, and this is an image of a cinnamomum. But I would like to say what an anthropologist and a social historian said about it, which really gives a sense of why cinnamon is very important to many cultures, and also for us. I hope I can convince you that in the Philippines it has been something of great importance. And so I just want to briefly read that, for the ancient Egyptians, cinnamon was a very much prized spice. It had goodly, fragrant woods of the divine land. And so they created a great story which captivated so many people, even before the ascendance of Europe. So before its widespread appreciation as a culinary ingredient, which we all have now, cinnamon was prized in several ancient cultures as incense, holding ritualistic importance, and it was sometimes burned for its fragrance on a funeral pyre. So in other words, when they cremated the people in these different civilizations, putting cinnamon was something that really in many ways was a way of honoring and farewelling these mortals and feeding it to the gods. But for us now, and I'm sure we've all tasted cinnamon in one way or another, the nature of cinnamon is warm and dry, brings about digestion, and aids stomach and liver with its force and fragrance. I would think that cinnamon is the same as cinnamomum, and so it has a lot of stories which are embedded in different poetry. So just to put things also in context, when Europe started...
We ask the other participants, sorry, Dr. Doronila, we ask the other participants to mute themselves while presentation is ongoing. Thank you.
Okay. So now just to put things in context, when the Europeans started showing interest in cinnamon, they obviously had to get it from the spice traders from the East. And these were mainly the Arab traders. And when the Black Death was gripping Europe in the 14th century, where, in many ways we're looking at what's COVID's happening now, but when the Black Death happened, it really almost wiped out Europe. It decimated them. So it was half the population was killed by this plague. And so from the aura of cinnamon, one of the things that especially people of influence and wealth thought that exotic spices imported from the East were a luxurious option for protection from the plague. So people who could afford scattering cloves, cinnamon, and fennel on their windowsills essentially felt better, because you put that scent in the air, it if you like, covered the scent of illness and death. So it was very much of value. But over time, cinnamon has been used for all sorts of things. And in Europe now, because of the introduction of cinnamon, a lot of their, if you like, prestige and comfort foods are laced with cinnamon. And this is just an image from the Wellcome Museum. It's a very important ethnographic museum in London. So it's a pharmacopoeia. And if you look at the image there, there's some of the things that you can see for some of the formulations. There's a gum nut. So I think that's Eucalyptus globulus there. Cloves, lemons, and you can see the quills of cinnamon on the bottom right hand. And I think that's thymol. So that's an extract of essential oil of thyme. So just quickly now, just to say, well, cinnamon has certainly been cited quite well known in the literature for many health-giving benefits. It produces the chemistry of cinnamon, of the plant itself, is quite fascinating, because it produces so many secondary metabolites which really are very bioactive. So one of the things that is recognized with cinnamon extracts, it is antiviral, antibacterial, and antifungal. Oops. And it has a lot of antioxidants, and which are very good for its anti-inflammatory effects. It has prebiotic properties, so consuming a certain amount of cinnamon really calms your stomach too, and it, if you like, also balances the biota in the gut. It's known for its blood pressure reduction capacities, and I think a lot of documentation has shown that it lowers blood sugar and lowers the risk of type 2 diabetes. And once again, it's an anti-digestive. And it's very interesting, and especially I just read a few days ago a couple of ethno-pharmacological, ethno-botanical studies that have just happened in some of the Katutubo in the Philippines, where they've demonstrated that cinnamon has been used in helping women recover from blood loss in pregnancy. Okay, so now here's an example of some quills of cinnamon, which I have in my kitchen pantry. So for us, cinnamon is the name for many species of trees and commercial products, but they're mostly well known for the bark that is produced. Now, the genus Cinnamomum is a very large genus, and it belongs to the family Lauraceae. Now, all of these have produced a lot of, as I said, secondary metabolites and are very aromatic. So the family Lauraceae has very many examples of very aromatic leaves and bark. But to date, only a few Cinnamomum species are grown commercially for its spice. And today it is the fourth most important spice after black pepper, garlic powder, and thyme leaves. And so what is it that triggers in our brain, why is this cinnamon? And essentially the aroma and flavor of cinnamon is derived from its essential oil. So all these aromatic secondary products which really perfume the air. And the principal aromatic component is an aldehyde, which is cinnamaldehyde. And that is its chemical structure. It's got that ring structure and that oxygen-hydrogen, that hydroxyl tail. So now let's go into a bit of history, and this was such an eye-opener for me, if you like, to discover that cinnamon has something to tell us in the Philippines. So remember, we just leave the era of the Black Plague, and the Europeans started exploring all around the world. So they had their maritime technology, and so it's the 15th century to the 18th century is when the Europeans essentially set foot in many parts of the world. So we start with Christopher Columbus. And so, if you like, he was the first of that generation of European explorers. And it was very simple. Someone like Christopher Columbus wanted to make money. He wanted to make his fortune. And so he realized one way to make his fortune was to break the monopoly of the Arab spice traders. So he said he offered a deal to the Portuguese royal house and said, "Look, give me money and I'll find the spices." So what happened to Christopher Columbus? He went on 4 journeys. Well, he was wanting to go to the Spice Islands or the land of spice, and he was trying to go on a westerly route to go down. And remember, they were going to the land of the Indios, if you like. But poor old Columbus, he wasn't able to take the right trade winds, and so he ended up drifting and discovered by accident the Americas. So he went there and he thought he had located cinnamon, among other things. And so he brought it back, but what happened was it was bits of bark from a perfume wild cinnamon tree, one of those 250 species of cinnamomum. But when he brought it back, the spice traders in Europe said, "No, this is not good enough." It was not very tasty. So just back to the drawing board for him. So the next person who attempted to, if you like, find the spices was the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama. So Vasco was the first Portuguese voyager to make the voyage from Europe to India. So he was able to capture the trade winds, which took him down to the south. So once again, the reason was that they were there to cut the middlemen, the Arab spice traders. So he arrived in India's Malabar coast, and from there they were able to eventually set foot on Sri Lanka. So this was if you like, a historic tragedy for the Sri Lankans, because essentially the Portuguese subjugated them to be able to possess the cinnamon, and so this was the start of the tragic colonization. So this is the trajectory of Vasco da Gama on his first voyage. So he was a very good sailor. So he was able to go past the Cape of Good Hope, which was a very treacherous seawater. They set foot in Mombasa, which became a very important Portuguese colony, and then eventually to the Malabar coast of Calcutta, and from there further exploration went to the island of Sri Lanka. So now let's go to the Philippines. So Magellan then thought, well, I would like to get into the act too. So essentially, Magellan was a Portuguese navigator, but he couldn't convince the Portuguese royal house to fund his project. So he was able to get a backer with the Spanish royalty, because they wanted to also compete with the Portuguese. So Ferdinand Magellan was able to take the westward passage and then go across the tip of South America, the southern tip, and then was the first explorer, if you like, to cross the Pacific and land in the Philippines on March 16, 1521. So this is the image of the 8-month-long journey, voyage of exploration of Magellan's team. Remember, Magellan was killed in the island of Mactan on the 27th of April. And so one of his ships was burnt. And so they ended up with 2 ships, which continued on towards Mindanao, and then to Palawan. They went to Brunei, and then to the southernmost part of the Philippine Islands, and eventually charting the coast, the southern coast of Mindanao, where they eventually went to the Spice Island, the Moluccas. So this is Magellan's voyage. It's the circumnavigation, and these little ships were quite incredible. So they left on 20 September 1519 with 5 ships, and then eventually they arrived more or less 3 years later on September the 8th, which is more or less the same time now. So this is a very big celebration in Spain. And so they ended up with 1 ship with 17 men. But fortunately, there was a good archivist in the Italian, Antonio Pigafetta. I was actually able to go visit the town of Antonio Pigafetta in just north of Venice, and everyone knows what Pigafetta is, but most of the people there didn't know about the Philippines, which was quite fascinating. So Antonio Pigafetta's journals were eventually published, and this is readily available in the public domain. And one important edition is the bilingual translation by James Robertson. And so this is the page where which is of interest of us. So this is what it says in English. So this was just 2 or 3 days after Magellan had met some of the people of just near Homohon Island. So this is the account of where they exchanged cinnamon. So while under sail, we bartered 2 large knives which had taken from the governor of Pulawan for 17 pounds of cinnamon. The cinnamon tree grows to a height of 3 or 4 cubits, so it's about 5 or 6 feet, and the branches are thick as fingers of the hand. It has about 3 or 4 small branches, and its leaves resemble those of the laurel. And it's the family Lauraceae, so that they have a very similar leaf appearance. Its bark is the cinnamon, and it is gathered twice per year. So they were able to get that knowledge from the locals. The wood and the leaves are as strong as the cinnamon when they are green. These people call it kayu mana. Kayu means wood, and mana sweet means sweet. Hence, it is sweet wood. Still in Bahasa, in Indonesian, it's called kayu manis. And so, if you like, eventually, this kaninga was if you like, a transformation of that basic words. Okay, so what happened then? So with, there's a feedback. Okay, so what happened then, after the Spaniards went to the Moluccas, they were able to essentially fill their ships with a lot of cloves and cinnamon, nutmeg, mace, and sandalwood. And so the 2 ships that eventually made it back to Europe, one of them was confiscated, was intercepted by the Portuguese, but the Victoria made the voyage safely back to Spain, to Sanlúcar de Barrameda, which is just the mouth of the river going to Seville. So it was quite amazing to think that the Victoria managed to escape with a cargo of 26 tons of spice, mainly cloves and cinnamon, mainly from the Moluccas Islands. But the value of that consignment was enough to pay for the whole voyage, the whole expedition, and they still made a profit. So it just gives you an idea, the sense that cinnamon really was worth a lot of money. So what happened next? So after that first discovery, the Spaniards felt, well, we have to try to go back there to the Philippines. So as we know, Miguel Lopez de Legaspi left Mexico to have to settle and create the first colony in the Philippines. So when they arrived in Cebu, they were able to load up cinnamon from Butuan, and he sent it back to Mexico on the ship San Pablo. He sent Mateo Saz, one of his lieutenants, to Zamboanga, and they were able to find a whole lot of cinnamon and other spices. Tragically, Mateo Saz also died from that expedition. And so, if you like, Legaspi and was able to open up this galleon trade, which is one of the first global trade routes in the world. So for 300 years, as you can see, the galleon trade from Manila to Mexico, there was a lot of exchange of goods from China, especially, and silver from Mexico that went to the Chinese, for making the coinage. And with that, there was a lot of cinnamon, and then that was sent back to Spain. But what was interesting was Legaspi sent 7,000 kilos, or 7,000 pounds of cinnamon. And he told the king that there will be enough cinnamon that can be shipped there every year to supply all of Europe, all of Christendom at that time, because these were Christian-influenced monarchies. So then we have, after the time of Legaspi, the second governor of the colony in the Philippines sent 2 more shipments. First, it was a bundle of cinnamon branches with leaves and 3 flasks of cinnamon water for the Queen Anna of Austria. And then the second shipment he sent was 8,000 pounds of cinnamon and 40 of wax sent to the royal officials of Mexico by the ship Espiritu Santo. So in other words, it was very easy to find cinnamon and send it over there. So by the 18th century, this galleon trade was very successful. But the interesting thing is, nearly all that cinnamon didn't come from the Philippines. It came, the Dutch traders who had essentially colonized Sri Lanka were able to sell their cinnamon to the Spaniards and then flood the market, because they were more efficient at harvesting cinnamon. And then eventually the English took over from the Dutch, and they introduced plantations of cinnamon. So that's why the Sri Lankans are, if you like, also the best in the world in terms of producing cinnamon, and I'll go to that a bit more later. But now, what happened then in the Philippines after they said, well, let's do something about cinnamon. So in 1761, it was very interesting because an English merchant decided that he wanted to make business in the Philippines. So he was able to convince the Spanish court, the royal court, to approve a project to cultivate cinnamon and other crops in Mindanao. So he was technically very competent. So he analyzed the soil that the cinnamon was growing in, and he also tasted leaves and the bark of the cinnamon tree. And what was very interesting is the cinnamon tree from Zamboanga, he was able to compare that from the one from Ceylon, which was Cinnamomum ceylanicum at that time. And this was a very interesting observation. And this is from a very good publication, a historical account by Father Francisco Magliari, a Jesuit, where he wrote about the Mindanao cinnamon, and this was written in 1974. And this was fantastic because he essentially said that the cinnamon from Zamboanga tasted just as good as the one from Ceylon, and they were able to mix it with chocolate, which came from Mexico. So if you like, the very first shipment of cinnamon that went from the Philippines to Mexico immediately created a new food product in Mexico, because remember, cacao or chocolate comes from Mexico. So someone there decided, let's mix the two things together, and they were able to create this magic comfort drink of cacao with cinnamon on it, which the Mexicans absolutely love, and for sure many parts of the world too. However, Nichols also died. So if you like, cinnamon certainly has caused a lot of tragedy to a lot of Europeans. So what happened next? So in 1774, that's approximately 20 years later, the former assistant of Nichols, Francisco Salgado, decided that he would continue on this quest to grow cinnamon in the Philippines. He was very convinced of the brilliant future of cinnamon and started raising cinnamon by planting some of the Mindanao seedlings that came from Nichols in his hacienda in Calauan, in Laguna. So that's that's not very far from Los Baños. Certainly, very rich soil over there. So from the 13 plants brought from Zamboanga, he was able to prepare 600 cuttings, and they planted. However, the cinnamon trees gave very poor yields because of one problem. They were very mucilaginous and lacking in some of the flavor qualities of Dutch cinnamon. So what happened next? So the Royal Botanist in 1788, Juan de Cullar, he went to the Philippines, and he being a very trained botanist, he felt that they had to do things in a more systematic fashion. They realized cinnamon was very lucrative. They had to really break into the market because they felt that the Dutch monopoly was something that they could take on. So Cullar grew cinnamon in a small plot in Malate, in Old Manila, and he was very good at it, and it looked very promising. And so he then decided that he would plant it out in a bigger plantation. So the company, if you like, the Spanish trading company, bought some land in Tiao, which is further south of Calauan. And so they took 1,000 cinnamon trees from the Calauan estate and took it to Tiao. However, this plantation was also a failure. So at the turn of the 19th century, this is what Father Magliari said. The local cinnamon industry was by then terminally ill. With poor quality material, it could not hold its own against superior foreign brands. So essentially, the Dutch sold their cinnamon to the Philippines, to the galleon traders. So that original enthusiasm that people had for nearly 200 years, essentially people lost interest. So as Father Malyari said, no amount of ordinance and cedulas from Spain or exhortations from various governors was able to really push and develop the cinnamon industry. So the end of the industry came at last in the 19th century. And this is what Father Malyari concluded, that it failed because there were selfish rivalries, there was apathy from the government, there was a lot of jealousy, if you like, in different sectors, there was graft and corruption. And the main reason probably was the lack of technical competence that killed a promising industry, which could have possibly made the Philippines a major rival of Ceylon as a world leader in the cinnamon trade. So essentially, the story stops there, if you like. That is for the Europeans. But I just want to connect the sense that, well, this was a remarkable product, which was very lucrative, but if you like, the Spaniards were not able to capitalize about it. And so the knowledge of cinnamon was there with the local Filipinos, but you know, they were not thinking of making lots of money at that time. But what happened, the story of cinnamon as a tree, if you like, also follows what happened to the natural forest cover of the Philippines over the time of colonization. So in the 400 years that the Spaniards were there, by the time they left, they had cleared 20% of the vegetation in the Philippines. So this is a well-known series of images, which a lot of people use quite regularly. But when the Americans came, they realized that there was a lot of timber that could be exploited. So by the 1920s, and remember the Philippines became an independent republic in 1946. So by the 1940s, probably 50% of the forest cover in the Philippines was already removed. But then from 1960 to the current time, there was a rapid expansion of forest cover loss to what we have now, 1999, but just to show what's happened now. So Philippine forest cover in those days, as you can see, we had nearly 28 million hectares, but over the Spanish time and to the time of the Americans, there were a lot of forest concessions. But unfortunately, what happened was timber concessions were already in place during the American occupation, but the timber licenses soared during the Marcos era. So from 1969 to 1986, there were 58 timber licensees. But however, this blew out of proportion in the time of the Marcos era. So from 58, they went to 471 timber concessions. And what was very tragic about it was the concessions went beyond 100,000 hectares or above, and most of them were about 40 to 60,000. But essentially, this was one way of they thought that this was a strategy in order to gain important foreign capital from the Philippines. But sadly, this really devastated, if you like, the forest cover in the Philippines. So at that time, it was equivalent to the loss of 800 hectares of forest every day during the Marcos era. But what happened, but what happened is when there was a change of government from the Marcos, so from the Aquino time till today, there was a moratorium on forestry. So in many ways, the forest cover has stabilized, but we still are a long way to really claw back all that. And so, if you like, conversion to agriculture, which probably happened from the Spanish time and today, and obviously it is not very difficult to see that this is what happened also to the cinnamon, because in many ways it is part of that forest that we lost. So what do we do about it now? So now in 2021, we have a unique window of opportunity to save our cinnamon species, which have in many ways been almost driven to extinction. Cinnamon tree conservation programs have recently emerged, which are empowering local communities to conserve remaining natural cinnamon populations. So these are just some of the literature that has come out of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. So an early publication looked at the potential of cinnamon as a product, as a food crop, and then very recently, in 2017, there is very useful publication about Philippine cinnamon. And so briefly, there's something about the taxonomy of cinnamon, and the 25 known, but there are 19 indigenous. I stand corrected. But I just want to put into relief 3 of the Cinnamomum species. That's from Cebu, Cinnamomum cebuensis, Cinnamomum mercadoi, and the Cinnamomum burmannii. But I'm very pleased that Jay Picardal, who is the authority on cinnamon, the current authority in the Philippines, is here, and he can highlight all these things. But what is interesting here is this Cinnamomum burmannii or Cinnamomum mindanensis has been quoted to say the bark is closely allied to Cinnamomum zeylanicum, as well as in appearance, taste, and odor. So this is, if you like, the zeylanicum or verum from Sri Lanka is, if you like, the gold standard of cinnamon in industry, if you like, because of so many characteristics. But they have these observations that there is one species in the Philippines that seems to have very similar characteristics of that. But this is Jay. So, you know, he did his doctorate on systematics, ecology, and ethnobotany of the cinnamon in the Philippines. But one of the important things that he's pointed out is the conservation status of, in this case, the 3 species that I essentially talked about. So the way you read that table that he presented is Cinnamomum mercadoi, which is nearly threatened. It more or less is known to occur in 1/3 of the Philippine surface area. Who knows, it could have been more, but at the moment, that's what it is. And it is near threatened, so it is of least concern, but who knows, there's still all this forced conversion that's happening. But if you look at Mindanense, which is the one that is very promising, and Cebuensis, they are possibly known only in such a restricted area now. And who knows, and there are many reasons that Jay had pointed out. And one of the things is we know very little about it, and you know, it is a challenge to really document it properly. But Jay has done a lot to forward our knowledge of these Cinnamomum species. But I just want to show you, well, what is it in the Philippines? You know, if you like, do we use cinnamon? Essentially, you look at the powerhouses of cinnamon in the world. There is Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka gains a lot of money from their production. They're only the 4th in production, and the amazing thing is we are measuring these in thousands of tons. So Sri Lanka produces about 15,000 kilos of cinnamon. But in the Philippines, we only use 29 tons, you know, and so we are very small players. So in many ways, you can just imagine, well, if we start trying to harness our Philippine cinnamon, we can already provide for our local market, and that would already create something very interesting. So this brings me to the next part of the story. So this was pre-COVID. I received an email from Miss November Canyesoyo. So she's the director of Plantsville Health Products, and she said, well, I have to say I met November when she was a teenager, because we have common relatives. So she was visiting in Manila. So this very enthusiastic young woman has become an entrepreneur and a director of a very good social enterprise. She essentially asked me for some botanical advice about cinnamon essential oil. So that is her involving in some of the startups. So she got essentially enchanted by cinnamon. So she started a blog and about organic home gardening and superfoods. And she came on about with cinnamon and really was enchanted by it. So she asked herself, how meaningful could it be if we could help grow back the Philippine cinnamon while earning for the farmers, suppliers, parents, employees. So she really became the driving force for this Kaninga Philippine Cinnamon Livelihood Project in Don Salvador Benedicto in the north of the island of Negros. It's a beautiful part of the Philippines. My mother comes from Bacolod, which is the capital of Negros Occidental, which is just somewhere in the middle, isn't it, November? But I recall some of the scenery when I was a young child. And so Don Salvador Benedicto is that forested area with that mountain there. And so this is some of the landscape that is seen. So that is November with some of the local farmers. November was recently interviewed by Radio SBS about the cinnamon story. So what she did was she started talking with the Negros Occidental Provincial Management Office, the PIMO, and asked where was the Kaninga. So she met with the small farmers there, who, despite having some Philippine cinnamon in their land, did not know that it was a valuable tree. So in other words, they had lost the understanding that this was something very important. And the tragedy about it is they were cutting it down because it's a beautiful tree, but they were using it to make charcoal. So in many ways, this is the lowest value product that you can get from a beautiful tree like that. I imagine that the charcoal or the uling smells very nice, so you can probably use it to make the roast chicken of Negros, the inasal, and I'm sure it smells very nice. So at that time, the farmers thought there were only 15 remaining cinnamon trees in the district. So November with Plantsville proposed to the Integrated Social Forestry Farmers Federation to grow Kaninga trees. So they applied for a livelihood grant, and remember there were only 50 cinnamon trees around there. So they presented it to the judging panel of the farmer, well, of the Kaninga Cinnamon Livelihood Project to the Northern Negros Natural Parks, Planning, Resource Management and Development, Protected Area Management Board. So as you can see, they have a panel of DNR heads, the Environment Office of the region, several congressmen, mayors, the local government captains, indigenous tribal chieftains, and the farmers networks, and someone from academia. So the short of it, they were successful in obtaining the grant of 65,000 pesos. So November, their funding model was, this was going to go directly to the Farmers Federation to plant the Kaninga. So she was able to enlist Dr. Ariel Tutor, a forester and the assistant dean of the Department of Forestry of the Western Visayas State University. He is an expert on the propagation of Philippine cinnamon. So they trained 53 farmers how to propagate it. So this is the whole process. They were able to bag them, create these nurseries for the Kaninga. They went out, collected the seedlings from the wild under these mother trees, and then they replanted them in the hilly areas. And then in the end, they started harvesting it via coppicing. So you have an example there of someone who's harvested. So essentially, the important thing is they were not going there to chop down old cinnamon. They were trying to conserve these mother trees, bring back seedlings and seeds, and then this is what happened. It was amazing. So after 2 years, they had this magic number. They were able to propagate 14,133 seedlings very successfully. So this was 76 farmers from 7 local government authorities, 7 barangays in Don Salvador Benedicto. And I'm happy to say this is now the largest Philippine cinnamon planting project. And it just shows you, it takes one person with a big heart and also a very good mind like Miss November to do something like this. And she's really catalyzed something quite remarkable. So what essentially they try to do is they regulate the harvesting of the Kaninga by coppicing, the technology that especially the Sri Lankans are very good at. And they're assisted by the Farmers Federation and the local environmental people. So essentially Plantsville held is tasked to develop products so they can buy the Philippine cinnamon that the farmers have planted. The farmers are the owners of the cinnamon tree, and so they are her suppliers. And I just want to show this. Does this work? So there you are, oops. So I just want to quote a very interesting, well, a lot of work has been done showing that local people, indigenous people who live in forested area, preserve environments better than governments. There are a whole lot of publications demonstrating that now, very important publications. And so in the Philippines, we have what are called the ICAs, Indigenous Community Conserved Areas. And this is a new structure or avenue where the indigenous people can really be tasked to look after these domains. So one of the founders of the ICAs is this Datu Makalipay from Esperanza Agusan del Sur. And I like his words where he says, for us, when we protect our conservation areas, nature protects us. If we abuse nature, it will no longer be able to protect us. We are not the owners of the land. We are only administrators of the land. So these ICAs may be sacred spaces or ritual grounds such as sacred forests and mountains, indigenous territories, cultural landscapes, or seascapes. So we have a lot to learn as city people, So what happened then? So on November's part and her team, they started engaging different expertise so that they can scale up their capacity. So Plantsville Health has worked in product development. So they really started looking at patent writing and training with Ipo Field in Intellectual Property Philippines. Actually, the IP structures in the Philippines came from Australia. It was the training from the Australian system that really created capacity in the Philippines. And so she's taken FDA registration, and that just happened in the last 2 days. So this is a very important development that I'm sure November will talk about later on. And these are just some of the products that have been spun off from using cinnamon. So bark chips, cocoa sugar with cinnamon, and very recently, because of COVID, they were able to access ethanol being produced, well, because Negros, after all, is the heartland of sugarcane production in the Philippines. They were able to also get ethanol at a very sort of competitive price, and they were able to infuse it with cinnamon essential oil, and it's been a very good product that's been released in the market. And now they've just commissioned their new distillation unit. They had a smaller one. This is a bigger one now, and they can deploy it to different areas to extract essential oil from the leaves, especially. So this is a very interesting development. And let's talk about food. Well, cinnamon, I think I never knew that there was actually a lot of cinnamon that is in regional cuisine, especially in the south of the Philippines, Mindanao and Negros. So here's one: Philippine cinnamon and lemongrass for the lechon manok. So it's roasted chicken. So the people from Negros, especially the Inasal, so using the cinnamon that puts it in a totally different domain of aroma. And then there's some pancakes. So rice porridge with chocolate and cinnamon, and then someone started making cocktails. But here's a very interesting one, using the cinnamon leaves with adobong pusit. Fantastic. So, if you want to learn more, and this is also our way of connecting with, well, what are the developments there? There is the Plantsville Health website, which is really a resource of information. And these are the partners that they've involved in. November has been able to gain access to funding from AusAid training camps in this program called ESIP. World Vision has really encouraged and funded some of the work of Plantsville Health, especially with raising native stingless bees as another product. And then these are some of the technology incubators that November and Plantsville Health have been working with. So now I just want to, I asked November, well, what is it that's deep in your heart about why do you want to do this? And this is what she said. I just want to highlight that we have completed the full chain for the Philippine cinnamon, for planting, processing, and selling. And this is in 4 years, quite remarkable. And she said, it takes a global village indeed to bring back the Philippine cinnamon into our forests and fields, our Filipino homes, both here in the Philippines and around the world. And she says, the Kaningag has already made this journey in the past, and we're bringing it back, and only this time in a sustainable manner. So what about us here in Australia and other parts of the world? So in the future, and it's not a distant future, it's actually happening now. I just had a conversation there yesterday where they're trying to work with some people to try to create business models to incentivize the farmers to plant and protect the Philippine cinnamon, so that it is possible to generate payments for carbon credits. We're trying to do that in Australia. So looking at crowdfunding to plant and nurture the Kaningag, and what is the gain for the locals, for the farmers in some up in the mountains, and it's providing a future for their children, by technology, education. So for me personally, I see this as an opportunity to invest in reforestation, which I feel very strongly, both here in Australia and I do my part, and in the Philippines. So it's an opportunity to conserve biodiversity, especially on my mother's island, and to provide dignified livelihood for locals and help mitigate global climate change. And what does it cost? I've costed it out. The funding to grow and nurture a cinnamon tree is $2. And most of that is to, well, $2 here is a lot worth a lot more to the local farmers in the Philippines. So this is just some information that you can readily avail of. And so I would thank you all very much. Damok na salamat for this wonderful opportunity to have joined in doing something where we really share this experience of bayanihan, both in Australia and the Philippines, so that we go forward stronger. We have to think of the future post-COVID, and this is one of those opportunities. Thank you very much.
Palakpakan. Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much, Dr. Doronila, for that very informative, very enriching, and if you may, very flavorful presentation. It's amazing how even if you focus on just one species of plant, it leads you to discuss so much history, aside from its beneficial properties, culinary properties, and of course its life-changing properties that truly changed the course of history. As we indicated earlier, we have three expert panelists in the program, in the persons of Dr. Vito Butardo, Dr. Vic Ilag, and Mr. Weber Cania. So yeah, let me just introduce them now consecutively, and then I will call on them to give their reactions, if possible, if we can limit this to 5 minutes or less. First, I'd like to begin with Dr. Butardo. Dr. Butardo is an internationally recognized cereal grain quality and nutrition expert, currently serving as a biotechnology lecturer in Swinburne University of Technology. He uses integrated meta-optics tools such as population genetics, structural and functional genomics, transcriptomics, proteomics. These are hard to read, but he can probably tell us a little bit more. And synchrotron-based imaging in elucidating the role of plant-based diets for optimal health and nutrition. One of his current research focuses is on elucidating the abiotic stress tolerance of cereals in response to unpredictable climate conditions. He is also interested in the role of prebiotics in enhancing the growth and diversity of probiotic bacteria for gut health. He obtained his PhD degree in agricultural sciences at the University of Queensland. And prior to his academic role in Swinburne, he was awarded 3 internationally prestigious postdoctoral research fellowships at CSIRO, Plant Industry, International Rice Research Institute, and the ARC Industrial Transformation Training Center for Functional Grains. He has active research engagements and collaborations with Australian startups and multinational corporations in the biotech, food tech, and ag tech industries. Now let me proceed with Dr. Vic Ilag. Dr. Vic Ilag has 25 years of research experience in discovery, preclinical and clinical development of biologics, and dietary food ingredients. He has done research that has applications in a wide range of disease indications. His experience is international in Europe, the USA, Asia, and Australia. He has demonstrated his entrepreneurial approach to biotechnology. Dr. Ilag graduated from the University of the Philippines at Los Baños with a BS Biology degree, major in genetics in 1985. He obtained his PhD in microbiology, immunology from the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in 1991 and did postdoctoral studies at Purdue University in structural biology until 1994. Currently, he is Chief Scientific Officer at Zerion Limited and a Director of Plantex Limited and its affiliated companies in the Philippines. Last but certainly not the least, Ms. November Canieso Yeo. She is a social entrepreneur, as was mentioned by Dr. Doronila, at Plantsville Health. Her areas of interest include conservation, livelihood, health. The trade name Plantsville Health, which she founded, is a fully registered social enterprise in the Philippines. They integrate growing the Philippine cinnamon and health food and non-food processing to make the livelihood of small farmers, resellers, and Plantsville sustainable in the face of climate change to ensure consumer health. Ms. Canieso Yeo has 12 years of managerial experience in sales, marketing, and business development in top 10 Philippine companies. She finished her MBA at the Asian Institute of Management and finished cum laude in economics at De La Salle University. She has strong leadership skills, excellent communication and interpersonal skills. And she specializes in marketing, relationship management, and leadership. So now we may probably proceed with the action or the presentation of Dr. Butado. Sir, you may share your screen if you're ready.
Hi, I have no slides to present.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's okay. So I think I'd like to begin with an anecdote by telling that when I started my journey here in Australia, it's actually Tito Amando and Tita Lulu who hosted me when I was new in Canberra. So, and then when I went to Melbourne, I met Yob, and he actually is the first Filipino who also supported me here in Melbourne and connected me to experts in Melbourne University. And for that, I'm really very grateful and thankful for the Doronila family. So I'm not really an expert with regards to the topic that was discussed, but so therefore my reaction would be more in the lens of grain quality and nutrition, because my research is really more on rice, other cereals, and therefore the thing that I really want to focus on would be three things: the health and nutritional aspect of cinnamon, the quality and yield, and of course the conservation aspect. To begin with, it's really quite interesting that Yob started the presentation with a historical context, and therefore it's not just a science seminar. It also touches on history, economy, socio-political situation during the Spanish time, and then the different environmental issues that we encountered along the way. So in terms of the health and nutritional implication, it's quite interesting that Yob highlighted the importance of or the antimicrobial properties of the Philippine cinnamon. Initially as like some sort of like, oh, is this gonna be an aromatherapy for the rich and elite during the the Black Plague? And then of course now we know that it has some scientifically proven antimicrobial properties, and therefore maybe one possibility would be research on antimicrobial properties. Who knows? It can potentially have some anti-COVID properties. One thing that I typically that I'm also doing at the moment would be looking at rice bioactive peptides, and this we're looking at the possibility of some of these rice bioactive peptide can have an anti-COVID property. We're just doing this by bioinformatics approach. So it's also very interesting that the Philippine cinnamon has antioxidant and anti-inflammatory property. That's one thing that we're looking at the moment is the Philippine heirloom rice. So I think maybe the Philippine cinnamon can benefit from the Philippine heirloom rice, and I really like Yob's title Pamana, because it's like even in the Philippine heirloom rice, as you all know, is that it's a legacy that's been passed on from one generation to another in the Benguet province, and therefore we're currently looking at the nutritional properties of this, and we're realizing that these rice are also rich in antioxidants, and we're also looking at the anti-inflammatory properties, and therefore maybe a collaboration with regards to the health and nutritional aspect. And of course, we have a good solid base of researchers, Filipino researchers here in Australia, especially here in Melbourne, and therefore it would be quite interesting in that aspect. So another thing, the second thing that I'd like to focus on would be the quality and yield. And of course, what Yob was saying is that the Philippine cinnamon is comparable to the Ceylon cinnamon, but somehow because of poor yield and maybe subsequently poor quality, it didn't really take off. And therefore, it would be very interesting if we can also explore quality and yield later on. In terms of conservation, it's quite disheartening because of what happened to the the deforestation of the Philippine forests. Historically, when you trace that, but it's quite interesting that now there's an ongoing effort to conserve and of course export can participate in say, for example, crowdfunding. So that to me is very exciting, and hopefully I can commit some of my time as well, and even resources in the university to help promote Philippine cinnamon. Before this, I wasn't really aware that the Philippine cinnamon is quite remarkable in the health and nutritional properties, and therefore it will be very interesting if we can publish some aspects of the health and nutrition related to the Philippine cinnamon. So I think I'll better end there. But congratulations, Yob. It's a very interesting and engaging presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Butardo. Now, there is a request, maybe before we forget, there's a request for us to have a photo op, a group photo. Yeah, before we move on to the reaction of Dr. Vic Ilag, if you don't mind, kindly show your pretty faces, those who have their cameras off. All right, thank you. All right, ready, 1, 2, 3. Another one, we have several. Okay, show your faces, please. 1, 2. Hang on, 1, 2, 3. Okay. And okay, I think I only have 2. All right, let me do it one more time. 1, 2, 3, and another 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. Now we move on to the reaction of Dr. Vic Ilag. Dr. Ilag.
Okay, I'll share screen.
Yes,
yeah,
please.
okay. Okay, so thank you very much again for the opportunity to present. Actually, I've never met, I've only met Gus, actually call him Gus, by Zoom since last year. So when he invited me, I took the opportunity. I never knew anything about cinnamon, but did some research. There's a bit of an overlap with my interest, and actually part of my interest is in disease and in particular inflammation. So if you look at most diseases or almost all chronic diseases like diabetes, Alzheimer's, and other type of diseases, including cancer, it actually is centered on inflammation, chronic inflammation. And especially in light of COVID, if you look at the comorbidities associated with COVID leading to death, if you have a comorbidity and you get COVID, the likelihood of you dying is higher than if you have no comorbidities. And the central underlying condition is actually could be blamed to chronic inflammation. Interestingly, cinnamon has unique properties which addresses inflammation. And it's mainly because of its the amount of antioxidants and mainly polyphenols. These are class of molecules found in plants. And cinnamon is known to have more polyphenols even than garlic and oregano. And these polyphenols are known to have anti-inflammatory properties. Although people have associated polyphenols as antioxidants, actually they're more than just antioxidants. They have multifunctional properties which could regulate different diseases. And as Gus pointed out, I think early in the presentation, you could got heart disease because it has been shown that it lowers blood pressure, at least in mice, lowers cholesterol. And I think a more important thing, which has been known for a while, and you could buy this as supplements in Chemist Warehouse, is you could have cinnamon tablets, and that has been shown to play a role in regulating or managing diabetes because it actually works on multiple points in regulating blood sugar. It directly lowers blood sugar. It also contains a molecule that mimics insulin. So that you don't have to produce insulin. And actually, the reason you're diabetic is you overproduce insulin, and that has consequences. It also then overworks your beta pancreas until you cannot produce any more insulin. And in addition, improves insulin sensitivity. So when you take cinnamon, you actually produce less insulin to metabolize more sugar. And that's why the idea I think I saw there, mixing it with your good dessert, champurrado, makes perfect sense. So even though you have high glycemic index, it has to be regulated by adding cinnamon. And after, even if with rice, we have cinnamon chicken with rice, so that could work perfectly. It also has beneficial effects against neurodegenerative diseases. It has been shown that cinnamon seems to contain a compound which prevents the aggregation of the tau protein, which forms the plaques in the brain. There are possibilities of preventing cancer, but mainly shown in cell culture. And again, Gus mentioned antimicrobial properties. There are studies showing that actually for viruses, it inhibits, at least in the test tube, HIV. So in that context, actually in a bigger picture, you would imagine that why would then cinnamon have these benefits? Was it by chance or by fate or whatever? But there seems to be an evolutionary basis behind it. And you probably heard of the word xenohormesis. Actually, this is a word coined by David Sinclair, who's at Harvard Medical School. Actually,
amazing.
David's an Aussie. And he had this hypothesis, xenohormesis. So xeno means foreign and hormesis means hormone regulation. It's based on the hypothesis that there's an observed increase of plant polyphenols because plant polyphenols is a representation of stress among plants, which correlates to increasing the longevity of the consumers of plants, like mammals. So whether it co-evolved, but there seems to be a beneficial contribution or synergy, showing the symbiosis between its consumer as well as the producer plants. That if plants are eating under stress, let's say climate change is one example, or an upcoming drought, there's an increase in polyphenol content, which may signal forthcoming conditions. And that polyphenols, which are produced, actually have beneficial benefits to the consumer, like man, which gives an advantage for that consumer or animal to begin to react and prepare for lean times. It has some beneficial effect. And the use that an example is resveratrol. You probably heard this, is the anti-aging molecule found in red wine. So resveratrol is a form of polyphenols, but there are a lot of polyphenols which share that same properties. It just happened that resveratrol was the first one which has been associated with. So this just demonstrates that conservation of cinnamon trees is important, not only for as an economic opportunity, but as well as more like a canary in the mine. So that by having a lot more cinnamon, we have at least some kind of additional survival benefits that we could extract from it. So for that, I'd like to end it. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity again.
Thank you, Vic. That was great.
Thank you, Dr. Ila. Maraming salamat po. By the way, if you don't mind, gentlemen and lady, if you could share those presentations to us, okay lang po ba? So they can all be
email? Yeah, no problem. Yeah,
Apo,
email ko
yeah.
okay, okay, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
Apo, yeah. We will compile this in one volume siguro. Okay, so now we move on to the reaction from Ms. November Kania Soyao. I hope I pronounced it correctly, Ms. Kania Soyao.
So thank you, Attorney. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Doronila and the embassy, the Consulate, for arranging this webinar. This is the first ever. So this event is historical for the Philippine cinnamon. I've also invited those who have really helped the Philippine cinnamon and bring it to where we are now. So thank you for the kind words, Dr. Doronila, but I'd like to share those words with all of those I have invited, either their customers, their incubators, their government agencies. They all helped the Philippine cinnamon. So maraming salamat po sa lahat. Siguro an update lang, no? Two things. So one, we're currently applying for the propagation of for mass propagation of Philippine cinnamon. We have been using only seedlings so far, but with the help of Dr. Tutor and the OST, we would be able to propagate the cinnamon via cuttings. So that's one. Second, I also invited Dr. De La Cruz here, who's an oncologist, and she tested the cinnamon hydrosol with her patients for skin itchiness. The first time that I've noticed that when my aunt who had cancer, she was telling me that there was no medicine in the market that could ease her skin itchiness. And I gave her the hydrosol because I have been using it when I am in the garden. It's very effective. And she told me when she applied it on her skin, instantly the itchiness went away. And this is now further corroborated by Dr. De La Cruz. So, and then I'd also like to recognize Mr. Jim Garrison here. We are now setting up a portal wherein we can connect farmers to carbon offset participants or donors, as well as for the aromatherapists who would like to access the Philippine cinnamon and other aromatic herbs from the farmers. So anyone who'd like to ask later about what we do or what's in the future would be happy to answer. So thank you.
Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much, Ms. Kania Soyao. So the floor is now open for everyone who may have a question or comment. I can see some comments from Conjan already here about cinnamon.
Okay, I might as well break the ice, so to speak. Yeah, as I mentioned in my opening, I have very little knowledge too about cinnamon, except that we use it for baking, right? And when we look and when we heard about the experience of Miss November in Negros, wow, amazing social enterprise, bringing back a heritage, I would say, and giving livelihood to small farmers. And then when I listened also to the therapeutic properties of cinnamon, both from Dr. Yob and Dr. Ilag, perhaps we can convince the OST that we can collaborate on developing further, products towards this, to discover more of the properties of cinnamon to help prevent and even cure diseases. Di po ba?
Yes, can I make a response to that?
Please, sir.
In fact, thank you very much for those words, Consul General Odette. And it is very true that there is really such a, in many ways, a blue sky for Philippine cinnamon, because at this point in time, there are only not even 10 chemistry publications, very basic ones on the characteristics of Philippine cinnamon. So, it begs the question, well, can we do something to make value of this? And in fact, the DOST has now this program which is called Tuklas Lunas. And one of the things that Dr. Ilag has been a very prime mover, because we are also a member of, if you like, a scientific association called PAASE, where we are really trying to devolve to the regional areas in really looking at natural products which can be harnessed for all sorts of good, what do you call these herbal, these non-mainstream products too, which can eventually be mainstream and be of wider benefit. And certainly, there is now greater capacity in the Philippines to do this fundamental research, which really has to be done. And we're really doing our part to make sure that Filipinos have a stake both on the ground and also in terms of scientific expertise in discovering and developing the expertise, so that we can deliver on these natural products too.
Yeah. Let me also mention here what Dr. Botardo mentioned about environmental aspect. What can planting cinnamon could help in our environment, reforestation. So siguro kung tutugni natin yung DNR, DOST, DA, DOH, marami tayong pwedeng matumbok na initiative and projects. And siguro din po, let me take this opportunity to thank yung ating, in-invite po natin yung ating Filipino-Australian students. They are here. The new president is here, and also the past president and some of the members. Thank you very much, Vasco. Thank you po.
Vasco.
Salamat po, Conjen. We have some questions from the participants. Mr. Gabi Roque is asking, what's the planting distance for cinnamon and what's the estimated income for a hectare of cinnamon? Dr. Doronila, would you like to take on that?
I think I'll pass that to Miss November.
Miss November?
On these statistics.
Yes. So the planting distance as recommended by DNR is either 3 by 3 or 4 by 4 meters. So that's one. And then in terms of income, depends, no? But from our experience, I would recommend to plant it for the leaves. because the leaves generate very fast, and you can distill oil from the leaves as we do now. So cinnamon oil is one of the highest value essential oil in the Philippines and around the world. And by the way, we are the only cinnamon essential oil maker now, and anyone else who has cinnamon can of course produce essential oil, no? Because almost all of the essential oils of cinnamon is imported. So that's a deep market for essential oil. And even for hydrosol, we sent the hydrosol to the lab, and it kills
November,
already.
can you explain what hydrosol is?
Okay. So when we distill the leaves, we are able to produce the hydrosol and essential oil. The hydrosol is of course water, no, hydro. And when we capture the steam, we condense it, and then when it condenses, it goes back to water. And then the water from the one that we harvested is called the hydrosol, and the oil is separate, the essential oil separates also after the distillation. So that's hydrosol. So the picture is we're selling it now. No, it's the natural sanitizer. It's composed of ethyl alcohol, hydrosol, and essential oil. So Gabby, in terms of income per hectare, we can discuss it. And I think this is also a good opportunity for all of us to strategize how we can produce, maximize that income per hectare on the cinnamon. Right now, the farmers are using it to plant in hilly areas where previously they have not been earning. So it was a good way to introduce the cinnamon in their plantations, because in their farms, because it does not disrupt their main crops, which are rice, sugarcane, pineapple, coffee, cacao, etc. So previously, the areas that does not earn now earns from the cinnamon.
Thank you, Miss November. By the way, don't forget we are already in the bear month, so tama-tama si Miss November. There is a comment from Miss Kate Cuico Colasio, and she is commenting on behalf of Dennis Sumailo. Nautusan pa. Great presentation, Dr. Doronila. I am keen to learn more about the historical geosocio-political impact of the possible cinnamon farming in your research, much like how horse rearing in northern China impacted their economic, political, and social lives. That's from Dennis Sumailo. Would anyone care to comment on that?
Well, just send me an email, and then you're in Melbourne, so we can have a coffee. We can have, and I can share all the literature that I've accessed to really inform me.
When the lockdown is lifted.
Yes. Yes. So gladly. So which university are you in?
RMIT, sir.
Malapit lang. So Melbourne Uni.
Yes.
We can have a meal somewhere. Yes, gladly.
Dennis is one of our student volunteers. He was the immediate past president of the FASCO, the Filipino Students Association here. Now,
so just send me an email and we'll organize something.
All right. There's a question from Miss Leilani Crucero. Would like to know if there's a story or experience about cinnamon as a treatment for or preventive for allergies. Maybe Miss November would know. Treatment or prevention for allergies. Would you mind unmuting yourself, Miss November?
Well, perhaps I can start with that.
Okay.
There is a lot of anecdotal information that, and like Miss November has just told us now, that there's these early trials that are happening where it really seems to subdue the rash that are caused from all sorts of reasons. But I've just read two very interesting ethnopharmacological papers of the Katutubo in Mindanao, and they use this for skin inflammation, for example. So it's knowing that there has been a traditional use of cinnamon, and well, it informs us on looking at it in a more systematic way if we want to use it for other ways of dealing with conditions like skin rashes.
Ma'am Lailani, I'm going to forward to you the report of Dr. De La Cruz regarding the use of hydrosol for cancer patients. Maybe Dr. De La Cruz would like to say something.
Okay.
Yeah. Dr. De La
Yeah,
Cruz?
good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, Dr. Fineza de la Cruz here. Sorry, I cannot turn on my video. I'm currently driving. But anyway, just to quick answer the question about allergy. I'm not an allergologist, but as an oncologist, my personal experience in the past month, giving this to my patients, no, it relieves their pain, their itchiness. Brought by the drying effect of the radiation they receive as part of their cancer treatment. So it acted like a supplement in the traditional aloe vera cream or gel that we radiation oncologists usually prescribe also to our patients. So that's it for my comment.
Okay. We have
Would
some
you like to
questions.
add on to that, Vic? Perhaps you
Yeah,
can-
anyone?
Yeah, actually, that's a big market. It's called chemo-induced dermatitis. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's an orphan drug status. So you could actually, if you go to the US, you could get exclusivity, market exclusivity. That's why I think one question I had in the post, kung okay lang, Miss November, do you know the composition of this hydrosol, and do you have any kind of IP protection around it?
Yes, I have already applied for IP protection for the essential oil and hydrosol. I'd like to do a shout out with Mr. Greg Crisostomo. He's head of the IP office in TUPV. He's the one who brought me and insisted, Miss November, you have to apply for IP already. Okay,
That's right.
so it's done.
But what kind of patent do you have though? What did you patent? And what status do you have? Is it at now? Anong status ngayon ng patent mo?
I applied for they cannot give a patent yet. They can only
Yeah, I
give
know.
model for the cinnamon species because the process that we're using is steam distillation, which is not novel.
Yeah, but you could file IP on your composition of your hydrosol. That's what I was asking.
Oh,
Have you
okay.
tried?
Sorry, I don't quite understand your question, but the hydrosol is pure. We did not mix anything.
Yeah, I know, but you could have a patent on it, but you did not file a patent on the hydrosol.
Yes, but now that you said it, we will talk about it. This,
Yeah, we need to get it characterized.
Thank you for it.
Yeah. You know, because if you file the patent, you have a certain window of time. Sometimes there's a bit of major danger in it. If you patent too much, but then you don't support it, you disclose it that somebody else gets it, then you cannot chase them anymore.
Yes.
So I think you have to work it strategically, think it through. I think this is a common mistake in the Filipinas. They think they file a patent in the Philippines, but then you don't cover the US, then what's the use then of filing in the Philippines? Because if Philippines lang ang patent mo, nakita no, well, you don't even patent in the US, nakita ng taga-US, kokopyahin lang nila, pero hindi mo na sila mahabol sa US kasi hindi ka nag-file ng patent sa US.
Okay.
So kailangan medyo kasi yung patent strategy nung ano.
Thank you. Greg, would you like to add something?
Yeah. Greg? Is Greg?
Sorry. I am on the other line.
Okay.
This is Greg Crisostomo. I am the actually representative from the Technological University of the Philippines, who is right now helping Mom November as a startup. And one of our assistants is how to protect her product, the Philippine cinnamon. Right now, the application is actually not for patent, but for utility model. And it's still pending as we are still clarifying some of the, as what Mr. Ilag said, no, the concentration of the hydrosol of the different parts of Mom November's product. So that is what we are actually protecting, the concentration of the different elements of the essential oil, the hydrosol. That's it. And it's still pending in the Philippine Patent Office.
Yeah. I think I know the Philippine patent models like patent after Australia, you automatically get that within 12, 18 months. But you use that as a basis to continue for to continue for the prosecution in other countries. So it's time zero, yeah? So that's your priority date.
Yeah.
But the fact that you filed it na, and if I'm not mistaken, you're nagtitinda na kayo, di ba?
Yes.
It's a bit tricky, pero tricky rin pagpunta sa US kasi may tinatawag silang, pag pinagbili mo na, considered it's in the market.
Yes.
I think you have 1 year. Yeah, but if you have more than 1 year, that's considered public domain.
Yes.
So you cannot claim protection on it anymore. So that's gone. Anybody can copy that.
Yes. You're right. Actually, what Mom November right now is selling are common and what do you call this? There are other, but the component of cinnamon and the variety of cinnamon, that is what she asked us to help her, because at that time they are still identifying the type of the variety of cinnamon that she is using, because she is not only getting it from Don Salvador Benedicto. So there are other. I correct me if I'm wrong, Mom November, but it's the variety. The last time that we were trying to discover if there are still other varieties that she is using aside from the a variety that she told us that. So actually what Mr. Ilag mentioned is correct, no? So actually what we advise is that it should undergo a route, international route, not only in the Philippines, but that would incur also expenses, a higher expenses, no? So that's what we're still trying to convince Mom November. Maybe if she has already the amount of money to pay for the international route. That's all. Thank you.
But that becomes bloody expensive, though.
Yeah.
So if I'm right, Miss November, tama pa. Sorry, yung pagkasabi nyo, kayo lang yung nag-export ng product na yon?
No, we're not exporting yet. Actually,
no, but selling it.
Selling
Nobody
it.
else sells that.
As far as I know, yes. Kami lang po.
Around the world.
No, in the Philippines. I just meant in the Philippines.
Only in the Philippines, but around the world, it's being sold now.
Yes, I think, yes, many people are selling hydrosol.
Okay. So, but there's something unique about your hydrosol, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes, because we're using the Philippine cinnamon, the Philippine species. Okay.
Because you cannot patent a natural product, even a composition. I think the product of your process, you can patent. Pero yun siguro, unahin. May tinatawag sa on sale or on sale bar ba tawag na?
Maybe looking forward also at some point, Dr. Ilag, we can consult the IP, intellectual property law specialist in the Philippines, or even the IPO field.
Yeah, actually, my brother's based in the Philippines. I think they probably know him. Yeah, he's a patent lawyer. So.
Yeah, and the intellectual property office also of the Philippines. We know some people there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I add more? You cannot really patent even the name Philippine. You cannot use it. That's yours because it's a proper name. And then the cinnamon, the varieties of cinnamon, you cannot patent it because that's already existing, a natural product, as Mr. Ilag said. what we can protect our process method, the concentration of the cinnamon, and that is what Miss November is actually trying to protect. No, okay,
Yeah,
that's
actually,
all.
sorry. Actually, there's another one, Miss November. You mentioned, I think, with Dr. De La Cruz pa. Actually, that could be, even though it's anecdotal, you could make a claim. Kasi supposedly, according to Dr. De La Cruz, wala pang nagpakita ng ganong effect. Well,
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
so
Maybe
you could write up something within that context na yun yung claim mo. So yun yung utility claim ng iyong ano. Ang problema lang sa Philippines, Mr. Greg, is hindi, walang
Yes, sir.
provisional. There's no such thing as provisional, no?
Yes, there is also, you have a utility, a patent, provisional, a petty patent, and utility model. What normally for products like that of Miss November, for a utility model, it's easy to apply. But for patent, it's difficult because you have to establish that it's novel and that there is a, what do you call this? An inventive step, something that is unique and not obvious. The inventive step is what is most important in a patent. The effect, as you've said, how that effect happened to be, that it was able to cure the itchiness. So that can be a protection that the cinnamon can have. Yeah.
Maybe
but you can't do
answer from Dr. Ilag, and then we'll wrap it up so we can give an opportunity to the others.
Oh yeah,
Dr. Ilag, please. Yeah, please.
just
you can
sorry.
wrap it up. Yeah.
So what you could do is a provisional. It's cheaper, and then you have 1 year to get the data. The reason good strategy, if you file a provisional, you have leverage na you have 1 year. The suggestions of Philippines, well, that's what they should be doing. You file a provisional, you have 1 year, and then within that first year, you try to license it na. So that licensor could then pay for the fees when you go to the PCT application after 1 year. Kasi PCT, pag nag-file ka, mga $15,000 dito, pero pag may cheap ka lawyer, pwede ano, then that gives you another 18 months. But that gives you window na pwede mo nang i-market. So yun yung suggestion ko. The fact na may unique ka, lalo na sabi, radiation chemo-induced dermatitis, yung sinabi ni Dr. De La Cruz, yung malaki yun. Yung aloe vera yung common, pero hindi na-obra yun, alam namin. So yun, pwede yun.
Thank you.
Thank you, sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Ilag. If you wish to pursue that, maybe you can have, you can contact one-on-one, and then we can also, so we can give an opportunity to the others to answer questions. I've been seeing a hand raised here from Miss D. Fernando at La Trobe. Yeah, it's back. Okay, yeah. Please.
Hello. Can I ask a question?
For sure.
It's Denise, yes.
Okay. I just want to begin by, oops, sorry, I've just lost my screen. I want to begin by thanking Augustine for an amazing talk. And Miss November, your work is absolutely inspirational. Thank you. It was wonderful. I've got two questions. My first question is, what were the mistakes that the early failed attempts to grow cinnamon in the Philippines, what were the mistakes made there? And the second question is, what natural ecosystems, what's the ecology of cinnamon? Is it a rainforest tree, or what sort of ecosystem, natural ecosystem, does it belong to?
Yes. Well, I can. So thanks for your words, Denise, and I think I'll ask Jay to fill in the rest of what I have to say. But certainly, according to the historical accounts of the failures of the growing cinnamon in the Philippines, it was very much the challenge of personal rivalry between different people, because essentially it's worth a lot of money. And so jealousy and trying to cut out your opposition was one of the big barriers, because in many ways it was cheaper to get the cinnamon from the Dutch. And then the English eventually they just offloaded it from the Moluccas and also from Sri Lanka, took it to the Manila, and then off on the ships.
I'm Sri Lankan, don't hold it against me.
Oh, no. I'm so proud of the fact that you are Sri Lankan, because the cinnamon really took off in Sri Lanka, because the English essentially made the poor Sri Lankan slaves to grow all their cinnamon. And so this is a very, very interesting parallel between your culture and our culture, that why did cinnamon take off in Sri Lanka but not in the Philippines? And so this shows the problem of why cinnamon was not able to grow in the Philippines, because the British were able to harness all their horticultural skills to create a product which was very regular, very standardized. The Philippines, because of all these other social issues, doomed it to failure. And so there were these interested entrepreneurs and hobbyists, if you like, who really were sort of shot in the foot every time things looked good because of personal jealousy. So in the end, you ended up with a very poor product because there was no sustained input. In fact, the interesting thing is this Nicholas, because he was an Englishman who really wanted to make money in the Philippines, was able to sort of get this, if you like, this royal permission to try to grow mass cultivate cinnamon in the Philippines. But then all the local Spaniards got very jealous and upset, so they did their best to try to stop him from succeeding. So it's all these other layers of human interaction which essentially doomed cinnamon to failure in the Philippines. I mean, it's interesting when you look at Indonesia and Vietnam and China, they produce a lot of cinnamon. In fact, we remember, Denise, when we went to Kinabalu, there were so many things that was flavored with cinnamon. Even the cigarettes have got cinnamon in it. But in the Philippines, you have to go to the regional places where they've kept this understanding, but it is not mainstream, but it's embedded in their culture, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And then the second question about conservation. Well, it really looks like cinnamon was part of most of the rainforests, because according to Jay and what I've read, there is a wide distribution of the very different biogeographic, bioclimatic regions where cinnamon grows. It's not surprising. It is a fairly robust genera. I mean, the fact that there are 19 species, indigenous species, it already says a lot, but we know so little. But forest loss has really created restricted the distributions now. And so, hopefully with something like this, where you also captivate people's imagination, that, it is something of part of our culture and heritage. Maybe this is a driver to really push back conservation. And so the economic drivers are important. Would you like to say something to that, Jay? Could you add on to that? Because you're the expert.
Okay, good afternoon once again. I'd like to in connection to the answer of Dr. Doronila regarding the distribution, I would like to mention specifically on the ecology of the cinnamon. I think it was also asked. So far, based on my field work as well as in employing, in employing species distribution modeling through maximum entropy, we were able to forecast the distribution, and then actual data from 1905 to the present until 2015 showed us that cinnamon in the Philippines, particularly 12 species, grows pretty well from 0 to 200 meters above sea level. Although the Mindanao cinnamon can grow as far as 1,500 meters above sea level, particularly in Mount Apo, for example. Cinnamon grows better and fast. They grow quick in lower elevation. However, there is this inverse relationship in terms of the quality of the bark. So they may grow faster at lower elevation, but the bark is quite thinner and of poor quality compared to higher elevation. They may grow slower, but with better bark. So this is also true and observed in some Asian countries, particularly in Sri Lanka. So basically, the Philippine cinnamon in general, with all those different varieties and species, I mean, they can also grow in areas where there is human habitation. So they are not that very sensitive, but they really prefer sandy loam soil. This soil composition is something that we would like to venture into, particularly on testing, for example, field experimentation where they might grow, for example, on purely sandy loam or a combination of other silt or clay, for example, something like that. But as of the moment, there is really no published record yet in the Philippines as to the soil preferred by these different species. However, in Cebu, for example, in Cebu province, we noticed that cinnamon can thrive even in rocky areas, particularly limestone or karst vegetation. In mountainous parts of Cebu, they are actually quite hostile to other plants, but they can actually grow there and thrive pretty well. So,
I've just got one more. Thank you. I've got one more add on to that. So, are the vegetation communities rainforest where they're found? What sort of vegetation structure?
okay. In some areas, for example, in Visayas, when we went to Visayas State University, they have this big rainforestation project, and then they were successful in growing 10 species of cinnamon. So basically, they can grow. They are very resilient in terms of adaptability. So they have actually a very wide range of tolerance to varying environmental conditions and bioclimatic conditions in the country. So that's quite good news. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. I think we have some questions in the chat. Let me just read some of them. I think we have a couple from Father Litoy Asis. How resistant is cinnamon tree to typhoon? How resistant is the cinnamon tree to typhoon? And he has another one. What happened to cinnamon and cacao choco combination? Would anyone care to answer this? Miss November, siguro Miss November to. Unmute yourself, please. Thank you.
Yes. From what I've noticed, the cinnamon is very hardy. It does not get uprooted a lot. But I'd like to ask Ma'am Lailani, because her farm has a lot of mature cinnamon, and also she also planted seedlings. No, Ma'am
Yes,
Lailani?
yes. Actually, in our farm, we have actually interspersed cinnamon with coffee trees. We also have cacao, but so far, since our coffee trees are still not too tall, the cinnamon trees are thriving. Although we have one problem, there's a certain fungi that attacks the leaves of our young cinnamon trees. But we have several, maybe more than 5 very big and tall cinnamon trees already. That's where we get our seedlings. And that's where November actually gets her supply some time ago. And the tree itself is very resistant to typhoons. It grows along with other trees. We have some mahogany, we have native trees, lawaan, we have nara, we have kulasi, a lot of other native trees. But these cinnamon seedlings actually just grow in between our coffee trees. And so far, we haven't seen any cinnamon tree uprooted with all the typhoons that we have here in the Philippines so far. And of course, as you have already mentioned, cinnamon trees that grow, upland, they actually grow slowly. It takes a lot of time, and we even have to supplement, with fertilizer, some sprays. But so far, I mean, not like other trees where you see a tall one by about 1 or 2 years. No, not cinnamon, not unless probably you apply a lot of fertilizers. But we do have a lot of these young cinnamon trees growing in our farm, together with coffee, together with banana, other fruit trees that we have planted, cacao. Yeah, we have a lot of them.
Can it grow in all parts of the Philippines?
I don't know. I don't know. Ours is about 800. Our area is up in the mountain, quite cold.
I see. I think
Yeah.
this forum has just sparked an interest in a lot of our kababayans here, maybe to go into business, ano? Kahit si Father nagtatanong eh tungkol sa
You know what I do? As soon as I see these young leaves of cinnamon sprouting, we just simply pick it up, and then we pick it and then I brew it, and that's our tea.
I see.
And
The
it
other
tastes
question
good.
of Father Litoy, what happened to the cinnamon and cacao or choco combination?
It's more of is it the candy as a chocolate flavored
I see.
cinnamon? Because Dr. Doronila mentioned it before.
Yeah.
But I don't know, is somebody venturing of it? Thank you.
It's an opportunity, isn't it? Oh,
Maybe what I will try is coffee with cinnamon.
Yeah.
We haven't ventured out.
I wanted to ask
Well,
about
they're both
cinnamon.
growing. They just grow together.
I wanted to find out where cinnamon in the Philippine sources its cinnamon.
Attorney, may I answer the question?
Yes, please.
On your question, if the cinnamon grows all over the Philippines, the answer is yes.
All
So, for example, Dr. Doronila showed to me a book by Mr. Ko.
Leonard Coe, yes.
It grows in the Cordillera. It grows in my garden in the urban area, and it grows up in Mindanao. So yes, it grows all over the Philippines.
That's good to know.
Father, on chocolate and the cinnamon. We used to have a product, and we had the cinnamon powdered, and then I sent it to a chocolatier, the one who makes tablea. And yes, we were able to develop it, but in the market right now in the Philippines, they're more used to tablea only. So maybe outside it's more popular. But what I do now personally at home is when I cook my tablea, pure cacao tablea, this is what I do. I boil water, and then when the water boils, I drop cinnamon bark, and then I simmer it for 2 to 3 minutes, and then I drop my pure cacao tablea, and then mix it very fast. So I get 2 ingredients in one drink. It's really good.
A good culinary tip. We have a question from Leilani Crucero. Would like to know if there's a story or experience about cinnamon as a tapos na to, no? Tapos na.
Tapos na.
Luis Junco, by the way. Do we have any update about Mindanao cinnamon conservation also? It would be great for product extension given its different flavor profile.
Well, this is the start of well, the fact that November has really put cinnamon in a wider, in a mainstream awareness. I think we have to capitalize on this because, we know all these anecdotal evidence of Mindanao cinnamon. This is our opportunity to value it, to protect it, and then harness its benefits for the people there. Anyway, perhaps can I ask? I'm so happy that Dr. Zayas is present. So, and she's been raising her hand. So, can we ask Dr. Zayas to say something?
I want to thank you for making cinnamon the it spice or the it medicine, because I don't understand why Filipinos is not so conscious of the cinnamon. But as I told you in the last webinar we had, that we in Mindanao is so conscious of the cinnamon. No, it's part of us, cinnamon. Anyway, since we are all interested in cinnamon, I think we need to practice cinnamon. No, we cannot just talk about it. We practice it. So I want to share with you my practice of cinnamon. As a field worker, I bring cinnamon stick all the time. You know, we walk a lot, talk a lot. Sometimes you have stale saliva. So cinnamon, as scientists have said, antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral. So especially in tropical countries, cinnamon is very good. You can chew it. It gives you a sense of well-being and have a good personality because you don't get that bad breath. You have the cinnamon breath if you keep on chewing it. And when you chew it, you even have your acidity in the stomach is balanced. So those who are often colic, oh, you will just throw away those air. And another thing, when you're perspiring a lot, you can just crack a bark and put it between your armpits, you know, two armpits. You put it and it helps, you know. So there are many things. You practice it, you bring it with you. It's so cheap, you know. You can get cinnamon anywhere, and they're very cheap, not the branded one. You know, there's a lot of cinnamon. I don't know where it's coming from. If you go to the Indian store, you know, the bark, the cinnamon bark, it's not refined bark, but it's a coarse bark. But nevertheless, it's cinnamon, you know, cinnamon. And I think November is correct. Cinnamon, you mix it with your sikwate, we call it chocolate, sikwate. It's good. And cinnamon, you know, the Vietnamese mix it with their coffee. And they have blended that Vietnamese coffee. There is a brand name already. Yeah, why not chocolate and other things with Philippine cinnamon? And I would like to congratulate you for naming it Philippine cinnamon. Kasi sa atin, cinnamon lang ang alam natin eh. But when you say Philippine cinnamon, ang laki nun, ang laking bagay. Ay, meron pala tayo. So I think that Philippine cinnamon is very important. Thank you, November 4, and Dr. Doronila, you know, this is very good for us. It's part of our identity. Hindi lang sa kanila nanggaling yung cinnamon, meron din tayo. Diba? Yeah, well, that's just a sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you, Dr. Zayas, for your
Zayas.
sharing. Very practical tips too. I'm gonna try some of those.
So may kilikili ha.
Wag lang po gagamitin sa bibig yung ginamit na doon sa ibaba. Salamat po. Salamat po. Now, meron pa tayong mga questions dito. Hindi ko alam. Well, some of them have been asked, but there is one here. I don't know if it's been asked. If planted for reforestation, how fast will the Philippine cinnamon grow? Or which type grows faster or fastest?
Well, I would say grow it where it not naturally grows. So this is how we extend our knowledge of them. Because we don't want a monoculture of Cinnamomum mercadoi, because there are 19 species. So we want to make sure that they all are able to grow back in the environment that they're normally found in. So this is where we also have to support important research like what Jay has done to further our deep knowledge of it, because as Dr. Zaya said, the fact that we have Philippine cinnamon, we should value that, and if we value it, we're able to use it as a driver for the conservation not only of cinnamon but everything else that grows with cinnamon in the forest.
Dr. Ilag is asking you, it seems cinnamon doesn't like too much water or too much rainfall.
I think there's a few answers to that, and it has been observed to grow along river sides and in very moist areas in the rainforest, like in Cebu, for example, and certainly in Don Salvador Benedicto, that is a rainforest.
And Dr. Zayas asked how about trying it Mount Pinatubo, where lahar and loam are still.
That's a very practical
can-
suggestion.
I think if we have 9 varieties, we can try all of that in Mount Pinatubo.
Yes,
Because
why not?
they need also reforestation because
exactly,
of the volcanic eruption.
You suggested introducing it to the Aitas of Porac, Pampanga.
Yeah, I think they know about it as part of
They probably
medicine.
do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Additional knowledge.
But yeah, the fact that there is a potential good economic driver it can be a big help, and you know, to harness that, because like, you know, with November, one of the things we say to each other is, well, we have to aim high, you know, we have to aim big. So, you know, from now on, we should try to focus on growing back 1 million cinnamon trees. It's not much to ask. The numbers, 1 million seems a lot, but it can be done. You know, if she and the people in San Salvador, Benedicto, have been able to propagate that 14,000 in a very easy manner. But you know, if we are scaling up the technology, I mean, that is only literally one cinnamon per hectare. Not even that in the Philippines, because there's 30 million hectares, you know. But it's trying to create these viable populations of cinnamon species, but also, you know, as a forest product, it really has a potential for doing something, a lot of benefit, and you know, something that gives us pride too. And obviously, you know, forest recovery in the challenge of greenhouse climate is one of the things that we can do this. And it's not that difficult to grow cinnamon anyway.
There's a question. Thank you, Dr. Doronila. There's a question from Ms. Hongko about it has probably been answered. Being tuob, a very popular as a means to somehow combat COVID. Can cinnamon be used in infusion or inhalation? I think this has been answered, no?
Yes. Well, do you want to say something to that, November, because you're a practitioner?
Yeah.
Yes, very helpful. When I do tuob, or when, for example, if my nose is itchy or I feel sore throat, then I do tuob right away using the Philippine cinnamon leaves. It's very, very helpful.
And it's very...
Month November, I was actually thinking more in the lines that, you know, since we discussed that cinnamon has this antimicrobial and even antiviral properties, will it possibly have an effect on for COVID? Just, you know, throwing out a question out there.
It's antiviral.
Yeah, it's supposed to be antiviral as well. And when you do inhalation, of course, it reaches the lungs. And I was just thinking, will it, by some means, you know, help?
Certainly, Luis, it helped us, especially when my mother had COVID. Everyone in the house did inhalation morning, noon, and evening. So it's really helpful. But yes, also, it would be a very good study if we pursue finding out if Philippine cinnamon can be used as relief or treatment for COVID.
Yeah, it's probably one of the things we can try. All right, Miss Lisa Pareño is asking, I am from Davao in Mindanao. I have ordered some seedlings last year, but I need to learn how to take care of them properly. Some insects eat up the young leaves, but I don't want to apply insecticides on it. I think this was briefly mentioned by Miss Crucero.
May I say something? Well, if she does not want to apply any chemical pesticide, she can always do some concoction, organic. In our farm we have madidi cacao, garlic, ginger. You can always use that, for ants, or if you don't want to use chemical pesticides, that would be helpful. That is if you have only a few, young cinnamon trees, but if you have already grown trees, that of course would be impossible.
Okay. So that answers the question. We have two last questions here in the chat. No, where can you get the cinnamon seeds trees for propagation? I don't know if it's been mentioned before. Marami nagkaka-interest, even from the Filipino community.
Talk to November.
Actually, attorney, right now I sell Philippine cinnamon seedlings, no? But my commitment to the farmers is I only buy from the ISF farmers. So what I do is, for example, first month I buy from ISF of Ma'am Lailani. The next month I buy from the next ISF. Third month, and then I say, I will stop first buying from you because I have to buy also from other ISF. So
yes. Well, may I say something? Well, actually, the seedlings that we gather, they simply grow around the grown tree. From the flowers, there are seeds, and these are scattered by the wind, and that is, we just go around to see if there are seedlings that have grown. And this is what November gets from me.
All right. All right. I think we have just one last question here. Among all 22 Philippine cinnamon species, what is the best species in terms of aroma and oil content? Aroma and oil content.
There's a lot of work still to be done to characterize all these species.
Yeah.
And this is where people like Vito, myself, and some of the other biochemists in the Philippines, it's a project waiting to happen. To you know, the fact that you can characterize them, because also that we know so little about it. So what you take one sample from one is only maybe for that one tree, because like Dr. J was saying, the soil type affects and also whether it's up in the mountains or in the lowlands can affect the oil content and also the ratio of the different aromatic compounds. So we really need a very intensive chemical characterization study of the cinnamons. And you know, I really hope that someone in the Philippines does it, because we have the capacity to do that there. And so this is where I'm trying to encourage, well, you know, my commitment as a balik scientist and also PAASE to try to open up this conversation so that, you know, and to help write the research grants so that this can be systematically done. I mean, it's a fantastic study because it smells so nice.
Yeah, can I just suggest something? I think
yes, please.
You can encourage your students, and with that kind of research, it has to be something like action research, in together with, for instance, I'm talking about Mount Pinatubo. This research should be in cooperation with AITA. If you want to come up with a nursery and come up with something else there in the field, then people are also educated and they will be planting and really appreciate what they are growing. So something like an action research and a basic research that is very needed in this kind of endeavor, you know, to propagate Philippine cinnamon.
Thank you. I think Mr. Picardal wants to add to what Dr. Doronila just said.
Okay.
Siguro after this, sandali po. After this, we'll wrap it up. Okay lang po sa inyo. I think we've exhausted pretty much everything we needed to discuss here. So, Mr. Picardal, please.
Okay. I think the question was quite interesting because the reason why cinnamon is being patronized by people, it's because of the aroma for different types of uses. So with regards to the most aromatic, based on our experience in the field and having searched different cinnamons all over the Philippines, the most aromatic is the Cinnamomum mindanaense, the one that was discovered or named in 1910 in Mount Apo in Davao. So it has the most aromatic in the sense that even in Bohol, for example, it's being used like what Dr. Zaya said a while ago. In Bohol, it's being used as a gum or as like a mouthwash. In Cebu, it's widely cultivated and naturally grown in the mountains of Bolhoon, as well as in Argao, as well as in Alcoy. And people would actually say that among the 4 common species in Cebu, it is the Cinnamomum mindanense, which is the most aromatic. So that's the reason why in our small effort in the university, we are actually trying to pursue research on this species. Although medically speaking, in terms of its pharmacological properties, it is not as widely utilized compared to the mercadoy as well as the inners, some of these species of cinnamon. That's it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Meron tayong dalawang pahabol dito. From Ms. Pareño, thank you for all information, answers, and suggestions. One more question. Is there any seed or seedling source based in Mindanao? Has this been answered?
November, I can say something to that.
Actually, I think in the audience, there's a Jojo Rome. He's from Davao. So we were discussing about replicating the project we have in Negros in Davao. So he showed me already some of the cinnamon species that is found in Davao. But at the same time, after we have done the propagation via stem using the mercadoy, we might opt to do also Cinnamomum mindanense. Jojo.
Please unmute yourself.
Unmute, yeah.
Hello, may hapon.
May hapon, Jojo.
Ay, Doktor, salamat. Salamat sa pag-invite niyo ulit sa akin. Oh. And dito ko ngayon sa Davao, ay pinayos lang sa sasakyan. Simula kanina, nakinig ako. Medyo nadidisturb lang pero naghanap ako ng lugar na Salamat sa invitation at lalo na kay Ma'am November. Yung project namin dito sa Davao kasi yung mga yung Pakibato areas of Davao infested, quote unquote, by the communist, the NPA for 40 years, and then you have this Peace 911 program, and para ma-restore yung state legitimacy sa lugar, and the trust nagsimula na siya, and then people starting to open their issues, saka yung problems, and then of course yung nag-surface doon talaga yung fear and hunger. So we have to start with urban container gardening, my own advocacy, the home farming. No, you grow what you eat and eat what you grow, to reduce your expenses on food. And since it's just it's a project that centers on building resiliency of the families, no, the surrenderies, to build their own resilience, especially in the food, no. So we have to elevate to the level of enterprises, no, enterprising. No? Dapat we can tap the abundant resources in the area where they can make money out of it, and as long as we can protect the mother trees, no. That's why I have to fast track the 7Ps program, the protection of the standing mother trees, the propagation by the surrenderies, no, or the youth, no, and the production or the plantation, the processing, powderizing. So basta 7Ps yun siya, until promotion dapat mangyari siya sa lugar, no, doon talaga sa site, kasi nililimit namin yung tinatawag na elite capture, na pag mayroong ganyang program, pag nag-surrender na mga NPA, papasukan naman ng Del Monte, pasukan ng Dole, pasukan ng Stanfilco, Tadeco, lahat ng mga big corporations, kasi almost 100,000 hectares yun. So it's an opportunity for them, no, to maximize the peaceful situation now, and to engage with the IPs na hindi ko naman sinasabing hindi sila marunong, pero talagang their offer to this land to the IPs napaka-attractive, no? Dahil 15,000 pesos per hectare times 100,000 hectares and advance for 5 years. So talaga napaka-lucrative yung offer ng mga corporations diyan. That's why the Peace Committee through the Peace 911 program of Davao City has to eliminate that idea of engaging with corporations. So our challenge also is to really harness what is abundant in the area. And we found out that cinnamon in Paquibato are still very abundant, no? Parang maski saan ka magtanong sa alam nila yan, pero hindi nila alam yung full benefits ng ganyan. Alam naman natin yan na pag ma-commercialize siya, parang nire-reduce yung value para walang magka-interest ng mga IPs. Katulad sa cacao ba, in Africa, hindi alam ng taga-harvest ng cacao na ito pala ay ginagawang chocolate, no? Parang ganun ba? So, ayaw namin mangyari sa Paquibato. So that's why, sabi ko, there are denuded areas in Paquibato. Why don't we plant those area with cinnamon? So that's why I have to contact Miss November if hopefully we can engage and learn from the experiences of the areas in Negros na kung pwede maturuan, especially on the social preparation part, no? Kasi meron talagang mga mga problema. For example, sabihin mo sa yung IP na may isang IP dati sabi sa akin, mapagpirahan ba yan? Sabi ko, hindi ko muna sagutin yan. At saka hindi ko pa alam kasi hindi man ako komprador ng cinnamon. Akala nila komprador ako ng cinnamon. Sabi ko, gawin natin, i-meet muna natin ang council ng mga IPs o dato o yung IP leaders and then discuss that the opportunity of cinnamon should benefit the tribe, no? Not the and then if there are machineries or factories or whatever machines, it should be placed in the area so that the assembly line or the production chain should involve the jobless IPs, especially those who are surrenderies. Because if we cannot rebuild the entrepreneurial capacity of these IPs, maybe soon they just go back to where they came from, no? Being the NPAs or the New People's Army. So that's why this type of seminar is really inspiring on our part as the one who are working for this for the peace work of Paquibato, no? Through the city government of Davao, that we can offer alternative livelihood. Hindi lang yung sari-sari, hindi lang yung kasi lang yan nauubos yan, but an enterprise that is based on their natural abundance of the area with good program, I think there will be peace in Paquibato. So nakakatulong po itong ginagawa natin. Nakikinig lang ko kanina, ang dami kong nakikita, wow, para palang gold itong cinnamon na pag ma-harness natin. I think this will help the country. This will help the IPs especially.
Maraming salamat, Jojo. Maraming salamat sa iyong input. Okay, those are very interesting inputs, especially as the issue relates to indigenous cultural communities, no?
Yes,
I think, Dr. Botado made a similar observation. Unless there are additional points you wish to raise.
Okay na yun, sir.
Okay. All right. So anyone else? So unless meron pa, I would like to close this. It's been very productive. It's been very fruitful, and we learned a lot.
Yes.
The Consul General conveys her thanks to everyone. Unfortunately, she had to leave early because she had to get her second dose of her vaccination. On behalf of the Consulate, maraming salamat po. At hanggang sa susunod, don't forget to support our activities in commemoration of the 75th anniversary of Philippines-Australian diplomatic relations. Maraming salamat po. By the way, the recording is with us. Yung mga interesadong humingi ng kopya later on, we'll find a way to give it to you. Maraming salamat po, our panelists, our main speaker, Dr. Doronila, our panelist, Dr. Ilag,
Salamat, Doc.
and Miss November. Magandang hapon po. Ingat po kayo lahat.
Thank you.
Okay. Maraming salamat sa inyo lahat.
Bye-bye.
Ingat po. Salamat, Jojo.